Hello, my name is Duncan McKenna, and today I'm going to be doing a book report over the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to by Alex Haley. I got this version at the Memphis Civil Rights Museum. It's a nice edition. Equal justice under the law. We try our best to believe those words, and we hear them in introductory law classes and journalism classes. We hear them in any government class in general. But for Malcolm X, those words weren't a reality, they were a question. Today I want to talk about the autobiography of Malcolm X, not just as a memoir, but as a road map. Most people know the basic version of Malcolm X, but if you look closely at his life, especially towards the end, you'll see two massive shifts that redefined his view of justice. First, he realized that you can't just talk about racism without talking about capitalism and, as an extension, Marxist thought. Second, he realized that justice isn't a domestic civil rights issue, rather, it's a global human rights issue. This is not something that you can just solve by looking only at your own nation. You need to have an international point of view around this, especially looking towards this third world that gets disproportionately affected by the same imperialist actions that domestic people are treated under. To understand how he got there, we have to look at his journey from the American prison system to the holy city of Mecca. To talk about Malcolm's view of the law, we have to start with how the law treated him. In the beginning of the book, he recounts a childhood defined by state intervention. After his father was tragically killed, the state didn't provide justice. It only provided him welfare that essentially harassed his mother until he had a breakdown. Until she had a breakdown. The legal system didn't protect his family. It actually did a lot of harm to it. When Malcolm moves to Boston and New York, he becomes known under the alias Detroit Red. He lives a life of crime, specifically, hustling and burglary. But looking back in the autobiography, Malcolm doesn't just blame his own morality. He frames his criminality as a byproduct of a system that offered him no other legal path to success. When he finally goes to prison for burglary, he notices something. The length of his sentence was not, appropriate to the crime. It seemed to him to be more about the social sin of a black man being in a white neighborhood, specifically with a white woman. Right there, the autobiography shows us that the law in America has always been used as a tool for the social and racial control rather than for blind justice. This leads us to the first big focus of this report, Malcolm's shift towards a Marxist-style critique of the economy. Now, Malcolm didn't usually walk around calling himself, an MLM or a Marxist-Leninist or a Maoist, but his analysis of the American power structure was deeply and inherently anti-capitalist. A little under the weather, sorry. While he was in the Nation of Islam, even more so after he left, arguably, Malcolm began to argue that racism is essentially, prop for capitalism. He famously said that you can't have capitalism without racism. Sorry. Why did he say that? Well, I believe it was because he realized that for a capitalist system to work, it needs an underclass. It needs a group of people who can be exploited for cheap labor to keep profits high for the people at top. When we look at traditional Marxist theory, the idea of the bourgeoisie and the proletarian, it is, intrinsically linked, that both of these groups must exist together, and racism is a very powerful tool to create a permanent proletarian, people who have no ability for upward mobility, and really no way to fight the bourgeoisie without unity, without a large form of mass organizing and trained cadre. And Malcolm X expands on that as specifically in how it is in America that the black man and the black woman are kept underclass as proletarian. In the book, he describes how the ghettos were created and maintained by design. He realized that the legal system, that being the police, the courts, the housing laws, all work together to keep black people in an economic cage. If you keep a group of people at the bottom, you have a permanent pool of cheap labor. Therefore, Malcolm's argument to his followers was that you can't just integrate into a capitalist system and expect justice. The system requires an underclass to function. Someone is always going to be oppressed. For Malcolm, true equal justice meant changing the entire economic engine of the country, not just getting a seat at the lunch counter. And you can see this still today when we look at electoral politics that seem to never actually work for the people, rather just, allowing people of different backgrounds to, interact and talk with each other. That doesn't really give us long, sustainable material differences that positively affect the underclass. Biggest turning point in the book, and the most misunderstood, is his pilgrimage to Mecca, or the Hajj. Before this, Malcolm spent years under the Nation of Islam teaching that white people were devils. He explains in the book that this wasn't just random hate, it was a reaction to the real devilish things white supremacy had done to his people. But when he goes to Mecca, his world gets flipped upside down. He sees people of all colors, men he would have called white in America, treating him like a brother. He eats from the same plate as people with blue eyes and light skins, and he realizes that whiteness in America wasn't a biological trait. It was a psychological and political stance. There was a deliberate change in America for what whiteness meant. In the autobiography, he writes a famous letter home. He says that the spirit of true brotherhood he witnessed proved that the problem wasn't white skin, but the system of white supremacy. He witnessed what got lost in my notes. This is a massive moment for his legal philosophy. He moves away from racial separatism and towards a universal struggle. He realizes that if Islam could strip the whiteness from a person and leave only the human, then there was hope for global justice movementism. He didn't stop being a radical, he just stopped being a racial essentialist. He started looking for allies based on their values and their politics rather than just their skin color. And, I'm from Kankakee, which is not exactly Chicago, but it's close enough. But we can look at Fred Hampton in a similar time period with his Rainbow Coalition, looking for allies not just within the Black Panther Party, but within the Mexican community, the Asian communities, the white communists and socialist communities, as well as the gay organizing sphere, using all of them together for a unified goal, not based on race, rather based on class. This brings us to his final evolution, the shift from civil rights to human rights. In the final chapters, Malcolm explains why this distinction is so important for the law. He argues that as long as you are fighting for civil rights, you are keeping the fight inside the United States. You are essentially taking your case to Uncle Sam and asking him to be fair. But Malcolm pointed out the flaw. How can you ask a criminal to be the judge in his own trial? By switching to human rights, Malcolm was trying to take the struggle to the international stage, specifically the United Nations. He wanted to frame the treatment of Black Americans as a violation of international law. He began connecting the struggle of Black people in Harlem to the struggle of people in Africa and Asia fighting against European colonialism. He saw it as one big global fight against imperialism and capitalist interests. This was his equal justice strategy. Stop begging for crumbs from the American legal system, which will never give you what you are looking for, and start demanding a place in the global human family. The autobiography of Malcolm X ends before he can fully realize these goals, as he is assassinated shortly after these realizations. But the book leaves us with a powerful challenge. For a class on equal justice under the law, Malcolm X's life is a reminder that the law is never neutral. It is either an instrument of exploitation or a tool for liberation. Malcolm's journey teaches us that you cannot have true justice within a vacuum. You have to address the economic system, that being capitalism, and the spiritual human connection, the brotherhood. He started as a victim of the law, he became a critic of the law, and he died as a man trying to rewrite the law for the entire world. He showed us that equal justice isn't a gift given by the state, it's a human right that needs to be demanded only through global solidarity. Thank you for your time. It was excellent revisiting this book. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Goodbye.